There is a ledger in the Parliamentary Archives at Westminster that most researchers walk past without opening. It is bound in the standard green cloth of an 1846 sessional paper, and it contains a list. The list records every canal company in England that was purchased by a railway company during that parliamentary session. I found it because I was looking for something else entirely. I was trying to understand why British rail fares are among the highest in Europe, and I had gone back to the original Acts of Incorporation, expecting to find the usual story of Victorian enterprise and progress. What I found instead was a pattern. In a single concentrated period, railway companies bought approximately a quarter of the entire canal network of England. They did not improve it. They did not operate it. They drained it, silted it, blocked it, and let it rot. And then they charged the public to use the replacement. That replacement is the railway you commute on today. But once I started pulling the thread did not stop. I had been looking at rail fares, at the peculiar fact that a return ticket from Manchester to London can cost more than a short-haul flight to Barcelona. The standard explanation is complexity, fragmentation, the legacy of privatisation in the 1990s. But privatisation inherited a system, and that system inherited a network, and that network was shaped by decisions made 150 years earlier. To understand why the railway became the only option, I had to understand what happened to the alternative. And the alternative was water. By 1840, England possessed the most extensive artificial waterway system in the world. Over 5,000 miles of navigable canal connected every major industrial centre in the country, from the coalfields of South Wales to the textile mills of Lancashire, from the potteries of Staffordshire to the docks of London and Liverpool. This was not a quaint relic of a pre-industrial age. This was the infrastructure that built the Industrial Revolution. Josiah Wedgwood, the potter whose name still appears on dinner tables across the world, was one of the most vocal promoters of the Trent and Mersey Canal in the 1760s, because he understood that his business could not grow without cheap, reliable bulk transport. The canal gave him that. It gave every manufacturer in the Midlands that. And the canals were profitable, enormously so. In 1846, on the eve of what was about to happen, the Trent and Mersey Canal was paying dividends of over 25%. The Oxford Canal was paying comparable returns, year after year, to shareholders who had held their stock for decades. A single share in the Loughborough Navigation, with a face value of £142, was changing hands for £4,600. That is not the valuation of a dying industry. That is the valuation of a monopoly on essential freight transport in one of the most industrialised regions on Earth. The tonnage figures confirm this. The Birmingham Canal navigations, the dense web of waterways threading through the Black Country, carried 7.7 million tonnes of freight as late as 1888. This was not a system in terminal decline, awaiting the mercy of a superior technology. This was a functioning national infrastructure, paying extraordinary returns to its investors, moving tens of millions of tonnes of goods every year across a network that had taken the better part of a century to build. Now consider what happened next, not over decades, but in a single parliamentary session. Here is where the history becomes difficult to explain as mere market forces. In 1846, at the height of what historians call the railway mania, Parliament passed 272 acts authorising the construction of new railways. The capital authorised in that single year was approximately £200 million, a figure roughly equivalent to the entire national income of the United Kingdom. It was the largest speculative investment event in British history, and woven through those acts, almost as footnotes, were the clauses authorising railway companies to purchase canal companies. Between 1845 and 1848, railway companies acquired approximately 1,264 miles of canal. That was roughly a quarter of the navigable waterway network. If the canals were genuinely obsolete, if the railway was simply the superior technology and the market was correcting itself, then why did railway companies pay premium prices to buy canal shares rather than simply outcompete them? The Loughborough navigation share I mentioned, valued at 32 times its face value, was not bought by an investor expecting decline. It was bought by a railway company ensuring decline. The pattern does not hold for one canal or two. It holds for every canal I checked. I want to take the London and North Western Railway first because its behaviour is the most thoroughly documented and the most difficult to explain as anything other than deliberate suppression. In 1845, the LNWR acquired the Huddersfield Narrow Canal and the Huddersfield Broad Canal, two waterways that together formed a critical trans-Pennine freight route. The Narrow Canal ran through Standedge Tunnel, which at over 3 miles was one of the longest canal tunnels in England. At the time of purchase, the route was carrying over 120,000 tonnes of cargo annually, according to the Board of Trade returns I have been working from. Within a decade, that figure had collapsed. I have been trying to trace the exact tonnage year by year, but the records become fragmented after the acquisition, which is itself part of the pattern. What the surviving documents show is a systematic program of neglect. The LNWR did not close the Huddersfield Narrow Canal outright because the Act of Purchase included a statutory obligation to maintain navigation. Instead, it stopped dredging. It allowed the water level to drop until boats could only pass half-loaded. It obstructed Standedge Tunnel, making passage so difficult and so slow that commercial carriers abandoned the route. When the Erie and Calder Navigation, a rival waterway company, attempted to revive trade through the tunnel in 1856, the LNWR blocked the effort. The tunnel was not formally closed, it was simply made unusable. And here is a detail I keep returning to, because it captures the nature of the destruction so precisely. The LNWR sold the canal's own water. Reports in the Huddersfield Chronicle record the company selling 200,000 gallons of canal water per day to local mills. The canal company was being drained, quite literally, by its owner. I am working from a transcription of one of the Huddersfield parish records, and I want to describe it carefully because it concerns people who left almost no trace. In the 1851 census for the Canal Basin area, there are families listed simply as living on boats. The children are recorded as having no school. The occupation column says boatman, or for women, nothing at all. These were the families who worked the Huddersfield Narrow, carrying wool and coal and stone through the Pennines. When the water dropped, their boats sat lower. When the tunnel was obstructed, their livelihoods were sealed inside a hillside. There is a woman in those records, unnamed in any document I have found, who appears as the wife of a boatman on the Narrow Canal in the years immediately after the LNWR takeover. I am constructing her from fragments, from census entries, and London City Mission reports on canal boat families and the Board of Trade tonnage returns that chart the death of her route. She and her children lived aboard a narrow boat. She had no parish. She had no fixed address. She had no vote. And the infrastructure that sustained her life was being sold from beneath her hull, 200,000 gallons at a time. The same pattern repeats across the country with a consistency that eliminates coincidence. The Shropshire Union Canal network, an entire system of waterways across the Welsh borders and the Midlands, was leased to the LNWR in 1847. The terms were elegant in their destruction. The railway company agreed to service the canal company's debts and pay a fixed dividend to its shareholders. In return, it took operational control. Within a generation, the Shropshire Union had been reduced to a fraction of its former capacity. The LNWR had no interest in maintaining a competitor. It had every interest in neutralising one. The Ripon Canal in Yorkshire was purchased by a railway company with an explicit statutory obligation to maintain it as a navigable waterway. The company neglected it regardless. By 1906, the canal was closed. The statutory obligation remained on the books, unfulfilled, unenforced. No regulator intervened. No court compelled compliance. The Croydon Canal in Surrey offers perhaps the most physically literal example. It was purchased by a railway company and converted, bodily, into a railway line. The canal bed became the track bed. West Croydon Station was built on the site of the canal's terminal basin. The water was drained, the clay was packed, and the rails were laid in the ditch where barges had floated. If a railway company buys a canal under a statutory obligation to maintain it and then lets it silt until boats cannot pass, what word describes that other than sabotage? And consider the Great Western Railway's fixed bridge at Kings Norton Junction, south of Birmingham. This was not neglect. This was not allowing a canal to decline through underinvestment. The GWR built a fixed bridge across its own canal at a height that physically prevented any narrowboat from passing. Navigation was not discouraged. It was made impossible. When the Inland Waterways Association confronted this obstruction in 1947, a century after the canal had been purchased, the bridge was still there. Go back to Standedge. Go back to the tunnel. It is an evening in the late 1850s. The water in the Huddersfield Narrow is low, so low that the boat scrapes mud with every yard of progress. The tunnel mouth is ahead, over 3 miles of darkness carved through Pennine rock by men who died in its making. 50 labourers were killed during the construction of Standedge Tunnel in the 1790s, crushed by falls, drowned in floods, poisoned by foul air. Inside that darkness, if the woman on the narrowboat were to listen, she could hear something through the cross passages that connect the canal tunnel to the railway tunnel beside it. She could hear a train. The railway company used the canal tunnel as a construction aid to bore its own parallel passage, and then it closed the canal. The sound comes through the rock like a pulse, the thing that replaced her, running through a passage that exists because her canal existed first. Her children are listed in the census as boat children. No school, no address, no surname that I can trace forward into the next generation with any confidence. When the canal dies, they will step off the boat and into an economy that has no place for them, no record of them, no memory that they were ever there. Within a generation, the canal boat families of the Huddersfield Narrow will vanish from the documentary record as completely as if they had never existed. The question I keep returning to is not whether this was deliberate. It is why no one wrote it down in one place. The canals were not hidden. The Acts of Parliament that authorised every purchase are public documents, bound and shelved in the Parliamentary Archives. The Board of Trade tonnage returns were published annually. The Hansard debates in which MPs discussed railway consolidation are on the record. The census entries for canal boat families are available to anyone with a reader's ticket at the National Archives in Kew. Every piece of this story has been in the public domain for over 150 years, but no institution ever assembled these fragments into a single legible narrative. The locked door is a conspiracy. The unfiled document is a system. What was lost was a functioning national transport network that paid 30% dividends and moved 30 million tonnes of freight. It was lost because it was in the way. And the fare the viewer paid this morning, the one that costs more than a flight to another country, is the price of the replacement that was never meant to have competition. The documents are all there. They have always been there. No one put them in the same room.